audience, as expected in the last slot on the last day. So we'll go ahead and start the session, and wouldn't expect that we'll meet the whole time. So I won't stand between you and our last closing event there. My name's Kirk Chan, and I'm with Smart ERP Solutions. Background-wise, I was, like many at Smart ERP, former people person. We used to call ourselves at PeopleSoft. And in my roles there, I was in corporate business development and also in PeopleSoft's product strategy. What I will cover today in terms of an agenda, we'll do some quick intros, which we're kind of doing right now, and talk about some of the kind of cloud features, some of which that you probably are familiar with, maybe others not so readily identifiable as a kind of a cloud feature, right? And also spent some time on what I identified here as kind of ways to kind of leverage the features. And I think that you'll find certainly some of the obvious ones that you are probably somewhat familiar with, but also I think touch upon some features that we're kind of leveraging that maybe isn't so readily identifiable, or you didn't realize you could kind of do that. And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Please do not hesitate to interrupt me. We have a small group, so it's not a big deal. If there's anything in particular, please feel free to ask during the presentation. Let me dive right in, and first of all, in terms of covering what would be a summary of the cloud features in PeopleSoft. First of all, we'll start with the PeopleSoft Internet Architecture, right? PIA, as it's kind of known, and what you'll note as well, kind of depicted in these pictures of databases in the center there. Everything that we'll cover in terms of features and ways you can leverage PeopleSoft cloud features applies to any app, any PeopleSoft application. It could be HCM, financials, whether it's financials or financial supply chain, campus, ELM, or what have you, right? Because it's largely the same architecture, the PeopleSoft Internet Architecture. Certainly with a small group like this, maybe we can get a feel for the audience, where you come from, what applications you're using. Maybe we'll start over here. If you could tell me what PeopleSoft applications you use.
Financial and supply chain.
Okay, financial supply chain. Very good. And what is your what's your industry? Is it manufacturing somehow, or
Education and research.
okay?
You guys implemented workflows.
Oh, is that right? Who are you with? I'm sorry.
Workflows.
Okay. Okay. Very good. You, sir. What application, PeopleSoft, do you use?
HCM.
HCM. Just HCM. And are you on 9.2 yet?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. And what industry is your organization?
Government.
Government. Okay. Local or federal?
Local.
Very good. Okay. Some of the kind of features and ways to leverage that I'll touch upon in the presentation. We'll use kind of some federal and public sector examples as well. You in front, if I could ask you what PeopleSoft applications you use and what industry.
We use, I think, a wide variety, since we use it for our supply chain, our financials, ePro, all sorts of different add-on pieces.
Okay.
And we're in the industry, or insurance industry.
Insurance. Okay, so it's just financials, though. It's not. Do you have HCM as well? Or?
I think we do. I'm not sure. I mean, because it's all on our internet.
Okay.
But I think the background is all coming from PeopleSoft.
Very good. you were on the aisle there. If you could tell us perhaps what applications, PeopleSoft applications
We
you
are
use.
using PeopleSoft HCM and FSCM 9.2 and government, federal government.
Federal government. Okay, very good. As mentioned, we'll probably touch upon some use cases or examples of federal government uses there. And finally, you sir in the back, what applications do you use?
I'm with Oracle.
You're with Oracle?
I just saw Cloud and wanted to see.
Oh, is that right? Very good. Well, what's your role at Oracle? And that'll help us.
Technology.
Yes, People Tools Technology PaaS Platform as a Service.
It's great. So any questions that we have, we can definitely direct towards the back. You will see, indeed, I am absolutely taking a lot of information that's available, and I'll show you where some of the references are from PeopleSoft materials. Thanks for joining us. We are doing a quick intro for what PeopleSoft applications you might be using in what industry, if we could ask you, please.
Oh, I'm actually functional. I'm just here taking notes for a technical manager.
Great. And are you from financials or
No, we are
HCM?
HCM.
Okay.
I represent the HCM area.
Okay.
We have another representative for the financial.
Okay, but your organization does have HCM as well as financials?
Correct.
Okay, great. And what industry, if I may?
Consulting firm.
Okay, very good. Okay, as mentioned, indeed, the PIA, as a lot of folks had, as we had kind of noted, is really, as it turns out, obviously, it's one of the first or the most obvious kind of cloud feature that we want to talk about. I'm sure we've all seen, this exact same architecture many, many times. But what I'll point out is that, it's an N-tier architecture, and what will come a little bit more evident and interesting for this presentation is towards the bottom where it talks about the access to the database. Okay, I don't know, you probably can't read it from back there, but it's the SAM layer, SQL Access Manager. That's where, that's a feature of the architecture where, in example, I'll talk a little bit about it. I can spend just a second on that right now, that's what enables PeopleSoft to have its database independence. Right, so you can run PeopleSoft it doesn't just work with Oracle database, but it certainly runs very, very well with Oracle, but you can use other databases that are compatible, that Oracle supports, such as SQL Server and the like. Pretty much everyone understands this, but it's maybe since it's been out for a while, it's really not that obvious that that is a quote unquote cloud feature, right? Of PeopleSoft. Now, what that is really beget, PIA, is what the most current user interface enhancements that we see in PeopleSoft now, starting with the most recent releases of PeopleTools, the fluid user interface, right, is kind of leveraging that PeopleSoft internet architecture in order to, without completely rewriting the PeopleSoft applications, you can have mobile-enabled, mobile-responsive applications, right, or at least kind of pieces of the applications. In terms of kind of leveraging it, it's not, as we know, all the transactions maybe that you might want to have fluid enabled aren't yet fluid enabled, but you can certainly fill it out on your own. For those that are on 9.2, is anyone here in the room using fluid in their 9.2 implementation yet?
We are upgrading to 8.5, so we'll be using fluid.
Okay, very good. So when you upgraded the tools 8.5, you do have some specific plans to leverage fluid user interface?
Yeah, it is by default, I think in 8.5, so we have to use it. So for self-service, like we are going to use
It is turned on, right?
Yeah, and
There is an option you can turn it off. Very good. What indeed what we have seen as well is that many organizations there, and I'm that too, haven't yet adopted to use fluid enabled transaction yet, but they're like moving in that direction. All right, one of the first cloud features I want to talk about is PeopleSoft deployment packages. And once again, this applies to whether it's any of the application at all. So DPKs, okay, as they're kind of known, is really a mechanism to help automate and streamline that process of deploying a PeopleSoft infrastructure into your environment. Are you guys, who's not familiar with DPK? Who has not heard of a DPK before? Has anyone not heard of a DPK? And this is again borrowed from some Oracle information. Basically, you have the ability to get the discrete files that you will be able to get from Oracle and download them. Okay, and that represents essentially everything that you need to deploy your PeopleSoft to a target environment. And it also includes all the information to install and configure. That's like the key feature there. It's not just like a convenient zip file that has things in it, but as part of the features of DPKs, you can have the configuration that is required to deploy into a particular target PeopleSoft environment as part of the DPK. So, for instance, when you are deploying, say, a new version of PeopleSoft, one of the attendees is looking at upgrading to PeopleTools 8.5 shortly, right? So when you deploy your tools 8.5, you're not going to do it in your production database, right? You're going to configure a demo database or some sort of other non-production database environment, and you're going to configure that with the new tools environment. So beginning with 8.5, what's noted here is that all PeopleSoft instances, okay, will be installed and configured using DPKs, which is great because it's going to make configuring and deploying out to those different environments, as you'll see in the presentation, much easier. Okay, so the key again is not just the collection of all the files that you're going to need, but the configurations. So, for instance, we talked about the configurations that you might need in your test environment might differ greatly from the configurations in a QA environment because it might be a different set of hardware. It might be different. The training database is going to be very different. Maybe your demo database is very different. It doesn't need to be very big, so it's much smaller in size from a resource perspective than your other database. So they may have some different configuration options, different things like IP addresses and things like that, connections. So as part of the DPKs, all of that can be essentially set up as configuration items and parameters so you can reuse it, okay? And some of the keys there are that a lot of the manual processes that are, for most organizations, required to set up a new environment, okay? Like when you're going to contemplate moving to the most latest 8.5 tools release, your IT groups are going to have to stand up an environment and start to configure it for taking and receiving that 8.5. That's not going to be the only environment. As you try to roll out 8.5, that's not going to be the only environment you're going to essentially need to do the same thing to, right? You might start with your demo database, then you're going to move on to your maybe test database or QA, train, et cetera. Eventually, you're going to get into production. But DPK will allow you to automate that process. So not just getting the software that you need from Oracle, but to capture the configuration that's specific to your target environment. So, in a nutshell, it will greatly enhance and streamline that process. Yes, questions?
So once you configure everything in one environment, using DPK, we can replicate the same thing in another environment
Yes, yes.
without any effort.
I won't say without any effort, because there are going to be some things that it's uncommon to have two target environments identical, right? There's going to be some differences, things just like connections, logins.
Yeah, those are
Right.
those are the common.
Right. But exactly, by and large, once you've done it once, then you can repeat and deploy in the same fashion, and that's absolutely where you get the benefits and the values. Other comparisons, again, for those that are less familiar with DPK, is noted in this slide, and I know it's hard to read. Borrowing again from Oracle information, comparing in this case the columns are virtual CDs, the Oracle VMs, and now the deployment packages, DPKs. I won't go through all the different features, but largely, as we know, a lot of the some found issues with the other methods, virtual CDs and that, in terms of compatibility of the target environments. Oracle's VM isn't the only VM out there, and there are other popular ones. So DPK supports all of that, right? So different platforms for your target DPK. So like an operating system for the Oracle VM in the center column, it's bundled with Linux, right? But for DPK, for an OS, any certified OS that's supported by Oracle can be used. And then, so it goes on down the line. Basically, it's much more open, much more flexible, and can work in virtually any environments that you might expect your PeopleSoft to work in. And again, I'll point out that starting with 8.5, all the deliveries are going to be via DPKs. So, going on a little bit further, how can DPK and the kind of the cloud architecture, some of the benefits. Again, it makes it so much easier and repeatable, right? Using DPK to set up those target environments, and for rolling out all of the different types of environments that you might need to support your production systems. As mentioned earlier, once you've done it once, and I'll go into kind of what done it means in terms of how the DPK process kind of works. Those configurations are saved so that you can, number one, reuse it verbatim. Next time you're going to do, say, that demo database into the same demo environment, you'll be able to reuse that. Next time you do it into your, say, a test environment, you'll definitely be able to use that. But in between as well, right? So if there are only some minor differences in the configuration of your, say, your dev environment versus your test environment, you can take that existing DPK that you've used for your dev environment, just make the tweaks that you need for your test environment, and then everything else can be used again. All that automation will just kind of pass through. Okay. Overall, it's going to make your IT organizations much more efficient in order to be able to support and roll out different environments. As mentioned, it's really gets distilled down to a quite simple process, kind of three-step process to deploy with DPK. You download the DPK, okay, from the cloud, and you configure the DPK to, with all of the tweaking that you need to have it tailored to whatever your particular target environment is going to be, dev, test, or training, QA, or what have you. Once you've done that, then you just deploy it, and it gets pushed out as per that configuration to your target environment. And as mentioned, once you've done it once, then you can reuse those components kind of over and over again. You've done it for dev now. As you go to stand up your test environment, you can leverage what you've done, do any further tweaks to it as you configure, and then redeploy it out onto your test environment. So it's really pretty simple. Now let's move on to, yes, question.
So what's the average time to turn up your environment?
I know in terms of numbers, your mileage will vary, but some estimates, for instance, I know at folks at Oracle indicate that to roll out environments for them typically can be done within a couple hours. So that's certainly remarkably faster, right? Than I would say, if someone told you, hey, they can roll out a new demo environment in 2 hours, or however they've done it, you'd say that's pretty good, right? And they say that they can do that. They do that regularly internally. Question.
So I understand with the DPK the deployment becomes faster, but if you have environment like where you have web server, app server, batch server all set like on different servers, is the deployment still the faster or like?
Absolutely, but you are setting up those configurations to match your target environment across all the entire PS stack. Right, all the web servers, the app servers, database servers, all of that is set up as part of the DPK configurations. So you can see where a lot of the repeatability and the efficiencies come from, right? If, say, in your dev versus your test environment, the only difference is that the web server is a little bit different because it's running on a different type of box or something like that in the test versus the demo. But everything else is virtually the same. You're going to reuse most of that same configuration of the DPK for test as you had already for demo environment. Absolutely. Across the entire stack, the DPK has a configuration parameters to match your target environment.
So you can change the domain names.
Oh yeah.
All that stuff.
Exactly.
And then for each server that you install, say web server, you have to go to that server and install on each server, or?
Each of the servers will be the recipient of or the target for that DPK. Something that will hit the web server, it's going to hit the app server with all the appropriate updates and things like that. If that answers your question. So across the entire
yes.
stack.
So it will always hit all the servers.
Right, and so you can see, very readily where you can gain efficiencies, because a lot of times in different environments, dev versus test or training, they're often similar, but none of them are identical, right? Some little differences, and so you'll just have a little bit different configuration for the test environment, a little bit different configuration for training, but by and large, for most organizations, they're not, 50% different, right? That's where you gain a lot of the efficiencies. For kind of moving on to how to leverage cloud features, one is what people often term kind of lift and shift efforts to take the environment from one area to another. In this case, take your non-production databases. Again, it doesn't matter if it's HCM, financials, or even campus or ELM. But lift and shift it. Your production databases, as we know, one production database usually has behind it that you need to support that. Any number of databases, like for test, training, demo. We talked about QA. Most organizations, maybe have 4 or 5 at least per production database, additional databases that you might have. You can help alleviate a lot of the costs for maintaining that hardware and the software and even the facilities, the real estate that's required to house these other non-production databases. You can leverage DBK to, in effect, a lift and shift effort to put some of those non-production databases out into the cloud, okay, where you can leverage providers that, that's what they do, is, will readily host environments, whether it's for QA tests or demo, in the like on the cloud. In that way, you don't have to have the burden all the costs of housing the hardware for that. It should take fewer resources on your side insofar as IT resources to kind of maintain all those environments. You can leverage some of the resources that your cloud provider can deliver, and it's certainly more scalable as well. If something occurs and say, well, now we weren't planning on going to, say, Tools 855, or we weren't planning on upgrading to 9.2 on my PeopleSoft HCM, but now there's some driving reason, and we need to start now. We need to start faster. We need to start rolling out new environments to support that. You start procuring all this hardware and getting that purchased and installed and configured so it can set that organizations, cloud organization, not just Oracle. Certainly, if you've ever used AWS or from Amazon Web Services, it's incredibly easy to stand up just the infrastructure anyway. And once you have set up and gone through the process of deploying, using DBK, deploying, say, your training or test or QA non-production database on your hosted environment, you can just redo it, right? And so in that scenario where you have a unplanned need for an additional database, again, maybe you won't be able to do it as fast as Oracle says they do it in 1.5 to 2 hours, but half a day you can stand up very readily, whole nother environment. That's so overnight you can get back to your customer and say, yeah, okay, that database is ready to be loaded for the new training database or what have you. So DBK it can be a great benefit to having and taking advantage of cloud-hosted environments and kind of a lift and shift type of model. Let me continue on for other areas that you can leverage cloud features. Again, it applies to any of the PeopleSoft applications. And this is a kind of feature that maybe starts to get a little bit less obvious. Okay, in this example here, this is actual use case of securely kind of cloud enabling a PeopleSoft HCM application, an on-premise PeopleSoft HCM application for an organization that is it's a federal government organization, and they have very everyone's information in their HR databases is very sensitive, right? But this organization, their employee information is highly sensitive because of it's a department or in the federal government that has global presence, and they've even made movies about how some of the employees for this department actually work for other agencies or also work for other agencies. But if you've ever onboarded to a federal organization, there's a lot of forms, and this organization, they had like 50 plus new hire forms. And so the application they want to cloud enable is automated onboarding solution that Smart ERP has as an add-on solution for PeopleSoft. And it's a PeopleSoft-based employee onboarding solution, and to help address their security needs as a federal organization, they had and used what we've termed as kind of a shadow database. Okay, shadow database that sits out, essentially, we can go into a little bit more in the following slides, sits out in front of the actual core HCM database with a logical and physical separation to enhance that security. And so let me show you in this diagram here some of the how that this cloud enabling is really affected by some of the PeopleSoft cloud features. What's shown here is kind of the top half is where kind of the core HCM environment is housed. Okay, again, this part here is on premise, and the lower portion of this screen here is where the employee onboarding solution lives. So it's separated by any number of firewalls and the like, but this then, just the onboarding piece of the functionality is exposed to the internet. And again, the use case is when new hires for this department are joining the organization, they can start and actually execute their entire onboarding process over the internet. They can be at home sitting on the couch with their laptop and start to complete the myriad of complex forms that are required to onboard to this organization. And they can do that securely over the internet. And the way logically this works is that as a new hire completes their information, again on the lower internet exposed cloud enabled part of the application, when they are done, and they don't have to complete their onboarding process in one sitting, right? When they're done, then from the back end, core HCM effort will come out and grab that new hire's information, all of their forms and such, completed, and then pull it back into the core HCM and actually add them as a new employee, okay, to HCM, along with all of their other paperwork, all those complex forms that were required. And once that's done, then up front here on the internet exposed part of the onboarding, that new hire's information is deleted. So this was driven by this department's requirements for kind of heightened security, right? So it's kind of not if, but when your front end might get hacked, the only information that's there are only for the new hires that are still in process for completing their form. So that's certainly a much smaller population. That's still not a good thing, but there's certainly a much smaller population and provides for much less risk than say, hey, I want to expose my HCM, and you expose your entire HCM, all of that existing employee information. So there's an example of you're using the PeopleSoft cloud features to essentially cloud enable in a very, very secure manner a on-premise PeopleSoft HCM application. And kind of speaking of hacks and that sort of thing, one of the most highly publicized hacks in federal government is the OPM, where everyone's information that applies for security clearances, and like Office of Personnel Management, anyone that applies for security clearances, all their paperwork and all that's done through OPM. I'll tell you a side story for this client. We had set up their onboarding in this fashion using this architecture, and we were done, and then we didn't hear. We did all the testing. We did not hear from the client, from the organization. and we're wondering, well, everything's done. We've done all the testing. Keep asking them, are you live yet? Are you using the system now to onboard your new hires? And we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear anything for months and months. And so we thought something was wrong with the system. Did some kind of showstopper errors or bugs were they encountered or something like that? As it turned out, because of the OPM hack, the government was kind of across the board relooking at a lot of their security and the like. So they were making some enhancements to their infrastructure before they rolled out this architecture to the internet. So that way they can add extra security if they have to, now that they knew that and kind of how OPM was hacked. Another kind of deployment example I can cover is kind of high security and high volume as well, kind of cloud deployment. The use case is very similar as the previous. Onboarding solution, and it's leveraging what I talked about in the architecture is kind of a shadow database. And in this case, that logical and physical separation from HCM enhances not just security, but also scalability. So this organization, a federal organization that gets very busy every 10 years. Okay, and they have to hire a lot of people. They hire 700, 800,000 people within a single year, taking in over 5 million applications for those jobs. And all of the new hires, in addition to doing paperwork, regular paperwork, they have to do typical things, I-9 and what have you, but they also want to leverage the DHS E-Verify for employment eligibility. So in addition to all that other paperwork, each one has to go through Department of Homeland Security E-Verify as well. So think of the staff that you need to hire 700,000 people within a single year. And as it turns out, too, most of the new hires within that year actually occur within a month or two. So it's not even spread out evenly. So extreme high volume, and certainly as well, as it turns out, as a federal organization, has very high security requirements. So using the same deployment that I just showed in the previous example, you get a cloud hosted for flexibility in how you deploy it as well, because when they prepare to be busy, that busy time, they're not just going to turn it on and be done with it. They're going to have to kind of ramp up in terms of their testing and the phasing and the like. So having that whole environment kind of cloud hosted allows the flexibility to build up to that. They're going to start maybe initial tests are looking at the 50% of that volume. Follow-on tests might test out 75% of that volume, and then as they get further on down the line, then they might move this entire environment to an environment that's going to support the full 700,000 to 800,000 in a year. So that's another example. And again, as we had kind of touched upon earlier, for affecting this kind of shadow database architecture, we're leveraging the SQL Access Manager feature of PeopleSoft Internet Architecture to enhance security. And the way that works is basically, if you've ever heard about what a database link is, we're leveraging database links so that, as far as the SAM layer, SQL Access Manager, is concerned, it doesn't care whether it's pointing at the actual core HCM database or